So, can y'all actually hear me? Because I'm having some kind of really weird thing going on today. I can't get my camera to work for anything. So, just let me know if you can actually hear me, though. Okay, so y'all can hear me. So yeah, I don't know what happened. I was having some issues with my camera over the weekend, but it was fine. And then all of a sudden, I got a new tablet to draw. It's an artist tablet you can draw on, and I've uploaded all the drivers, and now the camera isn't working, and I don't know if they're connected or what. So I've just discovered this, and I didn't have time to change my icon, so y'all get Baby Godzilla. Anyway, outside of that, I'm doing pretty good. I don't know about y'all. But yeah, so that's what's been going on. So how are y'all? Looks like everyone's doing well. And yeah, good news today. Well, news anyway. So the first part's good. The second part is just, where we're at. So, as I mentioned, I can't remember if it was last time or I think it was last time. Anyway, long story short, we can't use PayPal for Alan out in Kenya. PayPal doesn't like it. So we went back to Western Union, but they take forever. So I'm looking at other things right now. But I wanted to make certain he had the cash so he can actually, because they're going to be doing their new location this week, this Sunday. And he needed the cash, and of course it took Western Union 4 days to get him this money, and it's like that's the money he needs to make certain he has the room and all the things set up and etc. So yeah, that just took forever. So we're looking for alternatives right now. But if you want to help out with that, again, this is one of those cases where even $10 and $15 means a lot. Some of y'all have been giving, and we appreciate that. Just PayPal the money to me. I cover all the charges we sent to him. But yeah, so he got it. Plenty of time, new building, everything's going really well. Just the fact it took 4 days was outrageous. But what are you gonna do? So we're gonna look for new ways to do that. But so we're also looking at ways to make that idea of donating directly. You know what, Titan? Probably it is. So yeah, it's one of those things where I forget where I was at. So yeah, I'm going to be talking to some people about trying to find a way to make this sort of direct benefiting of indigenous peoples or pastors, missionaries, things like that. More mainstream, or easier to do. So I'm gonna talk to some people. So this has definitely been a good thing, good experience. So yeah, this has been an interesting week with that. But so for March, I'm gonna send out the funds on the 15th. And we'll just that way he's got plenty of time to get the money to do what he needs to do. While we find another way of getting money to him. And maybe once we discover that, we can take that larger. We can find other missionaries and we can make it a larger deal. So yeah, that's it. Yes, Titan, you have. It is to me. Yeah, I've been able to forward that on. So yeah, just for the time being, PayPal to me is still working. I think the problem is just that he's in Africa and they don't like that. So I get it. But yeah, no, that's been sort of the week. Everything's fine down here now. It's funny because like on Wednesday of yesterday, we were in the 80s. And a week ago, we were below zero. So that's how Texas is. But we're all good over here. Hi, Daniela. Go get your beauty sleep. It's too late for you right now. Go sleepy. That's pretty much all I've got. And yes, we're going to talk about the Nephilim. I know this is what everyone has been waiting for. This one's going to be, we're going to work our way into the Nephilim a little bit. We're going to try and, I kind of want to, I know everyone here pretty much knows what they are, but wants to talk about them. I just think we need I want to make sure that we've gotten some things out of the way first with that. And, I think we'll be good, and definitely by week 2 or 3, we're going to be going all over the place, all the crazy stuff everyone wants to talk about. Let's open with some prayer, and then we'll jump right into it. Heavenly Father, we thank you and we praise you for all that you've done. Father, thank you for allowing us to come here and gather. Thank you for moving with your hand, moving with Western Union so that the funds would actually get there in time, in spite of the Fed outage. Father, thank you for watching over every one of us. Father, we know that the world out there is the world we're supposed to be moving into. We are to be proclaiming your great name. Give us the courage to speak that name to those who need to hear it the most. Father, tonight let's not focus on our wants or our desires or our thoughts, but yours. Let's speak your words and your truths, because they are all that matter. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Not entirely off topic, but I was just thinking about his truths, God's truths. I was just thinking about that because today, I forget what I was listening to. Anyway, they were talking about a woman who made a claim. I'll keep it short and vague, but she made a claim that the facts bore out were entirely wrong, right? Like, this woman either is straight up lying about how she felt, or is so removed from reality that she probably needs to be on some kind of medication. But the way the news reported was, woman's personal lived truths are at conflict with facts. And you're like, what? It was just the most insane thing. But when I think about God's truths, the reason we want to focus on God's truths is because they're actually true. Versus this, I want your lived truth, which is just whatever is bouncing around your head on some day. It's just the world we live in. Anyway, so Genesis 6. Let's actually read the first section, and I'll stop basically where we're going to stop, because the bulk of Genesis 6 really has nothing to do with the Nephilim. And here's the thing. You can even argue that even the first part of Genesis 6 has very little to do with the Nephilim. It's interesting because the Nephilim, as important a player as they are in the overall biblical story, are not really dealt with all that often. In fact, by and large, the bulk of the information that we have for them comes from the Book of Enoch. And we are going to talk about the Book of Enoch probably next week, because we need to set up a lot with that. The problem is with this whole subject, there's what we want to think is true, and then there is what is actually true. And the problem is they're not always one and the same. This whole concept, or this whole topic of the Nephilim, is very complicated. And it's one of those things where we definitely need to be careful, because I think the problem is it's too easy for them to become a bigger part than they should be. But at the same time, what our culture has done is gone the exact opposite direction and completely thrown them out. And all we're trying to do is figure out where they fit properly in our broader understanding. So let's read the first part of Genesis 6 to set the tone, the mood, as you will. The fact that it's Baby Godzilla saying that's going to be reading that, looks like it's going to be reading this, I think is weird, but that's how this channel rolls, I suppose. I got to find a new icon for myself. So chapter 6. Now it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Then the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of his thoughts, of the thoughts of his hearts, was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry he had made man in the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man, for whom I have created from the earth, from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. There's so much to say here, but I do want to focus on the Nephilim because, let's face it, that's what we want to talk about, but also because I do think there's an interesting thing happening here, and we kind of need to establish a few interesting points. Because how we get them post flood, that's like an entirely different conversation. We're not ready for. So what do we have? I would like to. So that Titan, you're kind of going exactly where I kind of want to go. I want to address. Let's start with the text first, and address some of the issues people have brought up on this whole question. So the first question is: are the Nephilim actually offspring of the children of the daughters of men and the sons of God? We're not even saying who the sons of God are at this point. We just want to answer the question: are the Nephilim, these, which is what in English is translated as giants, is it that they are actually the offspring of the children of the sons of God and the daughters of men? Because there are some who will say the verse is saying, because it is vague, there is some vagary there, and so there are some who have argued that what's really happening there is that the Nephilim are already on the earth. They are present when the sons of God come down and do what they do, and that the children of these, the offspring are not the Nephilim. They are something else entirely. Now, the other reading of this is that the Nephilim are the offspring of the sons of God and the women. So I thought I would pull up Blue Letter Bible, because this is something to address. And here's the problem: really good scholars fall on both sides of this argument, and I mean really good scholars. So the question is, how do we know, right, that the Nephilim are the children of the sons of God and the daughters of earth, right? Like, how do we know this? So let's go back to the actual text. What does it tell us? And I've got the Blue Letter Bible pulled up here so I can actually go into the Hebrew. We're going to see some things. And it came to pass, when the men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair. So the sons of God are taking the women. Then we jump down to Genesis 6:4, where it talks about the giants. Well, obviously the word giant there is Nephilim. I've also heard it pronounced many different ways, so I'm going to stick with Nephilim because that's how I say it at this point. I don't know if anybody really knows. But here's where it gets interesting, right? So it does sound like they could have been on the earth prior. But I would argue that the fact that Gibor, right, which is what we translate as mighty men, right? That we would also call it Giborim, right? We see that later. I think that's sort of, there is a connection here, right? I think it is only logical, and I'm not even, you know what, I'm not even forget the Hebrew here. But I'll let Michael Heiser talk about the Hebrew. But it's just right there in the text. I think if they were trying to say that the Nephilim was unconnected to the sons of God, daughters of men, then it wouldn't have been mentioned in this way, right? It's just, that's just not how that structure would work. It seems like it would be a throwaway comment, right? If the point of the verse or this section was to not tell us that the giants and the offspring had any relation, right? Then I think they wouldn't. I don't think Moses would have put it here. It doesn't make sense if you're trying to say that the Nephilim are something else entirely. I just don't think you put it where you do. It's causational, right? It's at this time this happened. Sons of God, daughters of men, they started getting freaky. And it says, and there were giants in the land of those days. And again, because those were the mighty men. The only who here is the Nephilim. So I'm of the opinion, even in the English, it just sort of makes it clear that the Nephilim are the offspring. Now, again, like I said, there are good scholars on both sides of this topic. And Sir Like Titan asked, it does look like you could make the argument that the Nephilim are separate. But the problem is, this is not what the Book of Enoch says. Now, again, like I said, we're going to talk more about the Book of Enoch later on, probably next week, because basically everything else outside this event right here, this is basically all we know about the Nephilim. Everything else kind of is just in the background. So we do have to establish, does the Bible actually say whether or not they are related, or are they two different things? I think with my reading, it's that they are related. That Moses is saying that the offspring of these quote unquote sons of God and these quote unquote daughters of men, the Nephilim are the offspring. That's what's being said here. Otherwise, I think the structure would have been different. And like I said, unfortunately, since there's people on either side, I kind of use the Book of Enoch as my tiebreaker on that one. Like, don't get me wrong, I like Dr. Heiser, and he's of the opinion that the Nephilim are, and he's a grammarian, right? So he'll tell you, yeah, grammar tells you that the Nephilim are the offspring. But for me, I go back to the Book of Enoch on this one. We are told explicitly what's happening and who the Nephilim are in that book. And even if we were to ignore the fact that the Ethiopian church, has it, right? It's Titan. We'll get that. We're gonna come to that in just a second, because I don't think you're wrong there. I just think it's right. It's we're gonna give me a second. We'll come back to that. Even if we were to remove the fact that Enoch is in the Ethiopian Bible, the fact is it is quoted often. Like I said, we're going to talk about it because I don't think that I think we do need to look at the Book of Enoch differently than how it is often presented in those of us who deal with this. I think it's presented one way, and I think it should be looked at a different way. But it's quoted often, and it is very, very old. So it does at least represent, I think, the truth, or at least in its teaching of the Nephilim is absolutely true. So that's why I read it this way. Now, Titan brings up a great point as far as these, couldn't we make the argument that the Watchers, these sons of God, are the men of renown that's being said? Again, I've explained why I don't think that's the case, but I don't think you're wrong either. I think they are. And again, this is one of those things where we kind of have to understand, Moses is writing this story, or is writing this down looking backwards. So the people he's writing to already knew what happened to a point. They knew about the Watchers. They understood what the Nephilim were. And so he's just sort of setting up when this event occurred, because it's sort of in passing in the text. It's not that big a point. He's just saying this is when this event happens, and then he moves on to the story about Noah, right? Because they already kind of have a working understanding of all of it. It's not the primary point here. But before we get on to whether or not is it, that the sons of God become these Gibborim, or is it the Nephilim? I think it's actually both, and I think everyone would have understood that, and we'll see that with Peter later on. We need to now address, okay, so the Nephilim are the offspring, right? That's what we've shown, that at least it's ambiguous in the text, but when you factor in the Book of Enoch, we do kind of need to lean towards the understanding. And again, Heiser has he's a grammarian. He will tell you the grammar here tells you that the Nephilim are the offspring. I think it's the plain reading of the text. So they're the offspring. But here's the other question, right? And this is a big question. The next argument for this is, how do we know these sons of God are actually angels or supernatural beings, right? We're going to go through all these questions at the end, just because I unfortunately, there's too much in my head right now. It's been sort of a busy day. Keep asking questions, but we're going to go through them all. Because this one's sort of like just laying a foundation, so these are all great questions. So how do we know that the sons of God are actually angelic and not something else? Because one of the big arguments is that these are the sons of Seth. These were righteous humans who are basically hanging out with, Cain's kids, right? The first argument I would make for that is this. They could have just as easily wrote, the sons of Seth saw that the daughters of Cain were beautiful. He could have framed it that way. He doesn't. Instead, how does Moses frame this? In Hebrew, it's literally, let me pull up the Hebrew so I'm looking at it so we all know. When it came to pass, when men, which is Adam, began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them. So who are these? These are the daughters of Adam. What's the next verse? Again, there it is. And that the sons of God, Bene Elohim, sons of God, saw that the daughters of Adam, the daughters of men, the daughters of Adam. So what is literally being juxtaposed here is not two different lines of humans, but divinity with dirt. Remember, Adam means mankind, but also means earth. It is divinity, Elohim. It is dirt, Adam. I'm sorry, we can't reject the fact that is there. This is poetic reading. He is clearly, Moses, when in writing this text, is saying dirt and divinity. And that is the conflict right here in this verse. It's right there. So I don't think we can make the argument that it's the children of Seth. I think it's a bad argument. Okay, Trinity, I'm always having a bad hair day. So the next argument that's brought is, well, it can't be the sons of God. They still have to be the Seth, even though the text doesn't allow for it, because angels can't have children, because Jesus himself said in Luke 20:36 that angels can't have children. Now, let me go ahead and read that verse so we're all on the same board here, right? And I don't have a non-photo blue pencil in that one because I'm an idiot. All right, here we are. Verse 20, or chapter 20, verse 36, right? And so this is what's happened is the Sadducees have asked him about the resurrection. They give him the story of the seven brothers and the one wife, right? And so they're basically saying, well, what happens in the resurrection? In Jesus, by the way, just entirely irrelevant from what we're saying right now. I love this answer more than anything because because this is a trap. He knows it's a trap and he calls them on it. I love this response. He goes, Jesus answered and said to them, the sons of this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are counted worthy to attain that age and the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor given in marriage, nor can they die anymore, for they are equal to the angels and are sons of God, being sons of the resurrection. So you know what? It's the other version, Matthew and Mark. Basically, it's that version where he calls them out on it first. He's like, you don't understand the power of God, because the Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection. So it's one of those things where they are in Matthew and Mark. Jesus calls them out. It's like, y'all don't believe in the resurrection because y'all don't understand the power of God. And then he goes into this explanation. But he's right there. People point to Luke and they say right here, he says that they can't have children. Well, before we even hop over to the other two verses that this exchange is recorded in, because remember, Luke is not there. He is not present. Matthew and then Peter through Mark was. He's not saying angels can't have kids. He's saying they aren't given in marriage. Why? Well, we'll talk about that in a second. But they aren't given in marriage. Not that they can't have kids, but they aren't. Why? Because we are children of this age. And when we are in the future, we will not be children of this age. That's the comparison he's making. But what do we see in Matthew 22:30 and Mark 12:25, which recounts this exact same event and the exact same thing Jesus said? And I think my favorite version of it, because he calls out the Sadducees on it, but he says, you will be like the angels who are in heaven. Who are in heaven. Why would Jesus feel the need to make that distinction? Well, the obvious answer to that is because he is separating them from the angels that fell, that, as Jude himself recounts, left their first estate in sought after strange flesh. They left. The angels in heaven are not given in marriage. That's a human thing. That's a physical thing. However, the angels who aren't in heaven, those are the watchers. Those are the ones who fell. They're the ones bound in chains. They did leave heaven. They left their first estate. They eschewed the first estate, and they came to the mortal realm. They had children. Now, some people will say, well, hold on, can't sons of God mean righteous human beings? To which I will say, well, yes, it absolutely can in the New Testament. It absolutely. All right, yeah. So we're gonna come. We'll come back to that in a second. Here, we're working that way, guys. I assure you, we're going to get to all of it. We got to go step at a time here. Yes, you can in the New Testament we are righteous because we can be called sons and daughters of God. Why? Because we are adopted into the family. The Old Testament, the pre-Christ, you were not a part of God's family. It is a New Testament idea because we are saved. The Old Testament saints were made sons and daughters of God at Jesus' resurrection, when it talks about Jesus leading the captives free. He descended into Sheol. He reclaimed the souls of the righteous. He took them to heaven. They are now children of God because they have now been made, adopted into his family. It is a New Testament concept exclusively. They were to argue that the righteous of the Old Testament could be considered children of God in a textual sense is to actually throw out all of theology. And really, it makes you wonder, you're kind of calling Jesus into question. Now, people will say, but hold on, Adam is called a son of God. Well, yes. And now we'll get to Texas' question here. What does that mean? Well, the reason Adam is called a son of God was because Adam was created by God directly. Adam doesn't have a human father. God made him directly, so he's a son of God. And he's the only human who can make that claim, except for Jesus. Because again, Jesus, his father, is God. That's the point, right? That's the idea here. That is this broader theme. Humans are sons of Adam, the daughters of Adam. So then the sons of God, we are left with exclusively are divine beings. And well, Gene, don't worry, we'll tighten this up. I'm trying to help y'all be able to make the argument, because people are going to ask you this. They're going to, when you want to talk about this subject, they're going to throw a bunch of BS at you. You got to be able to argue it back and tell them why they're misusing scripture and what the correct understanding is. Because we got to be able to say, we know what these things are. Because if you don't, then the rest of it's irrelevant. Because if the Nephilim are just people with power, in fact, let me take a moment here. Very popularly taught, right? Oh, Paco, you know you love Godzilla Jr. And besides, Godzilla Jr. is one of the best theologians in the world, and we all know this. It's very popular in denominations that, let's face it, don't want to talk about the supernatural, to claim that the Nephilim are simply people with political power. They were tyrants in the pre-flood world, and that they are simply the corrupt children of Seth, and or the children of Seth and the daughters of Cain. That Cain's daughters polluted the righteous line of Seth, and that's all this is. It's just about the degradation of man. And the arguments against this just goes back to, what does the text actually tell us? The text sets up a conflict. It sets up divinity, sons of God; dirt, children, the daughters of Adam. The text does not allow us to put anyone else there. These are children. These are the quote-unquote sons of God. These are divine beings. That's what is happening here. And their children are the Nephilim, or the giants. Arguments against this? Angels can't have kids. Well, we've just disproven that. We've shown from the text that this is what's being stated here. Now, the last argument that's thrown, but let's go back to the sons of God. The idea of sons of God versus sons of man is a context that is thrown all throughout the Old Testament. In Semitic language, what you're saying is, what are you? Right? Who do you come from? Humans are son of man. You see that all throughout the Old Testament. Angels will come, and like Daniel specifically said, son of man, and when talking to a human being. Why? Because we are children of humans. That's who our fathers are, our mothers. They're all human. Angels were created by God. They are his children. Not in a necessarily biological sense, in the way that we have them, but it's to determine who and what they are. Where do they come from, right? It's one of those things where it's just telling you where they came from, right? The Semitic, to the Semitic mind, you had the physical world and you had the world of the divine, right? You were just basically saying where you're coming from. Interesting. It's involved here and slightly off topic, but it's on topic. The word Elohim does not actually mean God the way we think it, right? The word Elohim basically just means spirit. Because we actually see the word Elohim used when it's talking about Saul, the prophet Saul, or Samuel rather. I'm sorry, Samuel. When Saul goes to the witch of Endor, it is Samuel who the prophet Samuel who appears. He's referred to as an Elohim because he's a spirit being now. He's no longer physical. Elohim does not necessarily mean God in the way we mean it. The word God for us has connotations of God being the creator. The word Elohim, though, is more properly would be more properly rephrased as spirit or spirit being. Probably a better way of saying that other. So now, other thought. Okay, last thing here. People will claim that the word Nephilim means fallen ones. It does not. Michael Heiser has written extensively on this. For it to mean fallen ones, it's because Nephilim is a plural. It would be, I think it's conjugated from a different word meaning from Nephil, meaning to fall. That is not where it comes from. It actually comes from a Ugaritic word that means giant. That is why this is one of those times where the Septuagint plays a really important role, because the word Nephilim really is never. It's only used a handful of times, right? So it's ambiguous. So the fact that the scholars who wrote the Septuagint chose the word giant, and it's very specifically giant, in their Greek translation is important. It is confirming what Nephilim means. That it does mean giant. It doesn't mean fallen ones. It doesn't mean violent ones, corrupt ones. It means straight up giants. So what have we proven from the text? Because this is as far as we've gotten so far. What do we know so far? The Nephilim are giants. They are the offspring of human women and divine beings who left their estate, as Jude would rephrase it. That is what we know. Now, Titan, I think, was the one who made a really great, who asked her the question of, is it possible that it was the sons of God that became the mighty men, the tyrants of the time, and not the Nephilim? Here's the thing. I would argue it's both true. And we see this in Peter. It feels like it's a leap, but it's not. In First Peter, when it talks about the spirits trapped in hell, right? In Greek, it's literally the word Tartarus. It's often overlooked as to why he would choose the word Tartarus, because he had other words to use for hell, right? Like if hell was the point that he was trying to make, he had other words. So why would he use Tartarus? Tartarus is a very specific place in Greek mythology. It is the holding pen of the Titans. The Titans are the gods before the Olympian gods. They created the Olympian gods. If y'all seen the newest version, or you had the Clash of the Titans. They did a remake of the Clash of the Titans. They followed up with a sequel called The Wrath of the Titans. Kronos, who's released at the end, he is one of the Titans. That's sort of what they were going for. But all right, I'm back. All right, dang it. Something's going on. Can y'all hear me now? Can you hear me now? Okay, so it looks like I'm back. Yep. See, something's going on. Anytime you start talking about important stuff, that's when Satan likes to step in. Or of course, I am John Connor, so who knows? Anyway, so we'll just go back to, I don't know where I lost you, but so we'll just start from the beginning. So Peter knows the story of from the Book of Enoch is that the Watchers fall. They create the giants. They are they're ultimately imprisoned after the giants kill each other in a war. Like I said, we'll go over all this in more detail when we come to the Book of Enoch. But so he knows all this, and then he knows the Watchers are then imprisoned in the earth. And what he's doing is he's looking at the stories of the Greeks, the Gigantomachy, which is the battle of the giants and the gods and all that, and that the Titans end up being imprisoned in Tartarus. And he's seeing this and says, that's the same event. He's saying that the what we're calling the Watchers and the Nephilim of Enoch are the Titans and the giants and the gods of the Greek Gigantomachy, of Greek mythology. He's telling us this. Well, what we can take from that is that sort of a broader meaning here is that the gods that are worshipped by men then and now are the spirits of the Nephilim. In fact, the fact that we call them demons is that's not a coincidence. That's not a random word picked out of Greek. The rabbinical scholars were telling us something with that, because to the Greeks, the word demon is a spirit of what they called of these perfect humans from a golden age, that they bring knowledge. Remember, to the Greeks, demons were a good thing. Demons weren't bad. They were a good thing to the Greeks. And what were they? They believed in this golden age when everything was perfect, and that these humans that lived for a very, very long time, and that they were perfect humans, but when they died, they became demons, and they bring knowledge to modern man. That's what the word demon meant to the Greeks. Paul is he's connecting it all for us, or Peter rather. In First Peter, by using the word Tartarus, he's ultimately connecting it all together. And this is something that his audience would have understood at the time, because again, they read Greek, they understood the world around them, they knew the connections being made. It's just something that we've lost. The text is very clear. From Genesis 6 itself, these are giants. These are half divine, half human giants. The New Testament is confirming that as well. But what are they also confirming? They were worshipped as gods. I think when Titan asked the question, well, how do we know who are the men of renown? The men of renown, well, devil is just a the word devil it comes out of that same word. The word we get demon from, that's where that comes from. It's the same word. It's the same root word. I think what happened and what we're seeing here is the Watchers, they were worshipped as gods. They were the primordial gods. Their children were worshipped as the Olympian gods. Let's use that phrase. They were the demigods. They were your Zeus. They were your Poseidon. They were Thor. They were Odin. That's what they were. Probably had different names, but that's how it's been handed down. They were the gods you worship directly, and the Watchers were the big gods. They were the primordial gods. Those were the people you built the buildings for, and then you made your ultimate sacrifices for. But you worked for the Nephilim. You built the buildings for the Nephilim. You harvested the grain for the Nephilim for their blessing, because they could kill you because they were massive. That's what's being set up here. I think that is what the text allows us to. So far, the text of Genesis 6 allows us to make these connections. We'll talk about that Lamplight. We'll talk about that in a slightly different day, because that's it's an adjacent concept, but we're here for right now. But we'll come back to that because there's a couple conflicts here. That is what the text says. The vast majority of people who claim Christianity, I'm not saying they're not Christians. I'm just saying a lot of people, will claim to be Christian. They reject this teaching. Why? Because it's uncomfortable. Because this is so weird to the modern mind that they reject it. But we have to be able to stand and say, look, this is what the text says. Here's all the text in context. Yes, angels can have kids. The Bible doesn't say that they can't. Yes, these are the sons of God, meaning divine spiritual beings, not physical beings. And yes, they do have kids. The Nephilim are the offspring of this unholy marriage. They did take over the earth. They were worshipped as gods. Peter confirms that. When these Nephilim die, they become the demons. The demons that possess people, the demons that afflict people. Haven't you ever wondered why the demons that Jesus cast into the pigs, they asked him, are you here to destroy us before our time? We'll talk about that more next week because that's really from the Book of Enoch. But the fact is, why would these powerful divine beings, because we often look at demons as fallen angels, but if we look all throughout Scripture, angels are extremely powerful creatures. Why would they want to inhabit pigs or humans? A fallen angel wouldn't, but a disembodied spirit would. That's a demon, and they come from Nephilim. We'll go into that in more detail next week as well. So this seems like a good place to stop and actually start and go through and answer y'all's questions, because y'all have a ton of questions in here. So I'm going to scroll all the way up. And we'll hit them. Like I said, there's a lot here. There just is. So I wanted to lay a solid foundation upon which to build all this from. All right, let's start answering some questions here. Okay, are there two Enochs? Yes, there are two Enochs. There's an Enoch that was born in the line of Cain, and then there's an Enoch that was born from the line of Seth. They were born at two different times. So there are two different Enochs. There's not just one. And yes, Titan. Yes, I kind of wanted to bypass Job, where B'nai Elohim is used again, because B'nai Elohim is only used a couple of times in the Old Testament, and Job is one time. And that's an easy thing, and most people do it. I, however, wanted to kind of show that even without the book of Job, you could, in that text alone, you knew that these were angelic beings. In fact, this is one of those things I think people forget. The people who originally read this book did not have the book of Job. They didn't have the New Testament. The book of Genesis needed to make sense to the people who were reading it the first day, right? So the idea that it's like this is being said and it's clearly being addressed as if everyone knew what it was, it's like then Job couldn't play a role in that. That's why I sort of ignored the Job point. But yes, that is a great point, that B'nai Elohim is clearly referencing angels in the book of Job. Lamp of light, replenish the earth. Actually, again, the problem is if you read, we've talked about this in Genesis 1. Replenish actually does not mean it was full, empty, and then full again. The word replenish actually in English still means to fill up. It's just, that's the English word. But like I said, we talked about that in Genesis 1. Cheese freak, I look like this all the time. And yes, so we're going to talk about this more when we get into the Book of Enoch. But the angels do exchange knowledge for the women. Like that's how they're exchanging this knowledge, the knowledge of magic, of astronomy, metalworking, weapons making, building. So they absolutely, I would argue, they take Stone Age man, and which is what we were pre-flood, right after the flood. or right after expulsion from Eden, we were basically cavemen, hunter-gatherers. That's what we would have been, and some farming, because remember, agriculture was what Adam was sort of condemned to as his punishment. I think they advanced us up to the Iron Age very quickly. Remember, people were living in hundreds of years. They could learn a lot. They could do a lot of things, but I think they advanced us easily to the Iron Age, and we'll talk about that later. But yes, they did. The angels exchanged their knowledge of the universe for their wives. Trinity, I never have a bad hair day. Okay, so this is probably a question: Are angels male? And are they not married because they're all? So here's the thing: the angels are always, they are addressed as masculine, and this is one of those important things we have to understand. Divine beings are divine beings. They are not male and female. Male and female for us exists because we are sexual beings. That's how we reproduce, right? That is how we continue our existence, because we are not immortal creatures. Angels, though, they do not procreate. They don't create new angels. Angels are only created by God. They are addressed as masculine, but that doesn't make them male. In truth, they are probably, again, I think to address them as having a sex is, they're not an it. They are people. So it is correct to address them as masculine. But we need to understand that they don't marry because they don't procreate. That's not what they need to do. We do it because that's how we continue. That's part of what we are. When we are resurrected, we become a completely different kind of creature. We would still be male and female, but we would have no need for procreation, no need to create new being, new life. So there would be no more marriage. Marriage and sex, these are all functions of life on earth, just as many things are. So angels don't marry because they have no need to marry. They have no need for procreation. That's just not anything that's built into their functionality, which is why the Watchers descending becomes such a problem, because that's not what they're supposed to do. They're designed not to have children, and yet they come down and they do. Now, how do they do it? A lot of people, some people try and speculate. All we know is that they did. Truth be told, I think the fact is they probably just took on human bodies. I don't think they possess. I think they just turn themselves into humans. Angels clearly have that ability, but they turn themselves into humans so they can have kids. And I think the reason the kids came out as giants. Well, okay, I won't go into that detail yet. That's for later. That's the whole conversation about genetics. But angels, by and large, are not male. They are masculine. They are sexless. They are personalities. They are divine beings. They don't have to do the things that we do. Like I don't think that they don't have to, they don't get colds either. Same sort of idea. It's just we are sexual beings for procreational purposes, and it's part of what we're designed to do. They are a completely different thing. Titan, and remember they were in good standing, according to Enoch. They have not been judged yet. Yeah, so again, everyone's judged at the end. Now again, we'll get into the Book of Enoch. The 200 Watchers that fell, they are in Tartarus right now. They are chained right now for their crimes. Their ultimate judgment has not yet come, but they're in a holding cell waiting for judgment. And yes, it is the 200 Watchers. They, again, mating, that's the kids. That's what they did. Trinity, I think we addressed your question. Are children considered the same thing as offspring? They are, but again, the idea of sons of God versus sons of man or son of man, that's about it's about what world you belong in. Sons of God, they are Elohim. They belong in the spiritual world. Son of man, which is again man, Adam. Adam also means dirt. We belong on the earth. We are creatures of the earth. They are creatures of divinity. That's sort of the idea being expressed there. Cheese freak. Actually, that's a great point, and it's actually something that inspiring philosophy, who is not of the supernatural persuasion for as far as his interpretation of the sons of God, but that's a good point, and that's something that he has brought up as well. Cheese freak asked, said, "Didn't they?" It says they didn't marry. It says they took the women as wives. Couldn't this means that they made it as if they were espoused? I think that they are. You're actually onto something. They took as wives. They were wives, but the problem was that they were taken. They weren't espoused. They were just they came. They showed up to like, we got all this knowledge. We're going to take these women, and so we can have kids, right? And when we get into the Book of Enoch, we will find out that actually having children is why they did it. So this was not necessarily a rape or anything like that. They were married, but it was more forcible. It was, they showed up, they're like, you give us your women or your daughters, we'll give you all the knowledge of the universe. And that's what they did. I don't think the women had much choice. Trinity, yes, as we you came in a little later than that, but that's one of the things we pointed out was that the distinction in Genesis 6 is sons of God, daughters of Adam, so they are human women, yes. So yeah, I mean, you can argue that they're not really recognized as married. I think Bigfoot Michigan Rob has a great point. I think you could argue that they were not truly married because God would not have recognized this marriage, and I would agree with that. And again, Paco, I'd like to point out that Godzilla Jr. is one of the great theologians of all time. You can shut your face. Lamp of Light has a great question. Would being impregnated by a watcher change her DNA? I don't think that it would have. And when we talk about the giants next week, we will get into some genetic things, because one of the big assumptions that's made when we look at the elongated skulls, people are looking for non-human DNA. I don't think you're going to find non-human DNA. You're going to find human DNA. It's just, it will be different, but it will be human. So I don't think that they changed the human DNA. They changed they took on human form, but human form had it had some shortcuts. We'll say it that way. Lamp of Light. Yeah, the Book of Lamech is not one that I necessarily. I don't know that it. I would say it's even less reliable than the Book of Jasher. And the Book of Jasher that we have is a medieval forgery. So that's. But I do think that they are born out of Jewish mythology, so they have some minor value, but I wouldn't put too much on it. So Bigfoot Michigan Rob, were these giants essentially displaced and their descendants in modern time? Okay. So here's the thing. I'm going to jump ahead. If I'm of the opinion that the Nephilim, again, as we'll see in the Book of Enoch, the Nephilim of that time were destroyed pre-flood. They do come back post-flood. Most of them are destroyed. Many of them are destroyed. They do seem to continue. But they are the demons that most people see. I do think there are Nephilim today. I just think they aren't where we think they are. I do think that the Antichrist will be a Nephilim, but I think the spirit that will inhabit that body is actually much older. It may even be pre-flood. It may be post-flood, but we'll talk about that when we come to it. Yeah, so Gary Wayne and a lot of others talk about portals, so that the angels can come back, and we'll talk about that more when we get to the Tower of Babel. Yeah, we don't, and yeah, we don't know if they were born normal sized or and grew or what. We just don't know. Um, and so there's sometimes it's like we speculate, but we speculate without any real information, so we just don't know. In fact, here's the thing: these children. Let's even ask it this way: who's to say that they didn't? Again, these are angels who are having kids. Who's to say they did that they weren't like born, but then they stayed in like some sort of a pod and grew even more until they reached full maturity? We don't know. Um, so I just don't think it's worth speculating on that per se. And we'll talk about the height next year, probably next week as well, because that does tie into the Book of Enoch. And that's where I got lost. That's where the gremlins showed up. What is it? Yeah. Again, more reason why the Book of Lamech is not necessarily anything I'd count as legitimate. God, Fallen angels, train knowledge for women. Yes, we talked about that. We'll talk about that later. My spirit. Okay. All right, last two questions then. In Mr. Knuckle, we're going to come to that in a second. Titan asks, one question: are we or will we be dealing with this in the end times? Answer is yes. In fact, I think we're dealing with it right now. I think when it comes to Nephilim, and this is something we, like I said, I just wanted to establish what the text actually says, so that when next week we can build off of that. In many ways, the best way to think of what a Nephilim is less. We need to focus less on the angel aspect of it and more on the corrupted human aspect of it. Nephilim are not, I would argue, we can't limit it to just the offspring of the angels. I think these are corrupted. They're not truly human. That's the main thing about Nephilim. They aren't really human beings. That is what we're facing today. And yes, I think that there will be, in the end times, we're going to see legitimate Nephilim show up, absolutely. But I also think it's the concept of the Nephilim is far more than just angels and humans. It's more about the fact that these are non-human beings with sentience, and they are not on our side. So yeah, I think we will absolutely be dealing with them. I think we're dealing with them now to an extent. We can talk about that more on another show. Like I said, we're going to be here for a real long time, so feel free to ask the questions. And Cheese Freak, we're going to probably end on that one. Mr. D. Knuckle, the question of, my spirit, is God seeking himself for angelic beings, in verse 3. So let me reread that. So just to refresh everyone's memory. What's funny is I had the verse from John about where Jesus is like, where he quotes Psalms about being God. So we didn't even get a chance to address that because everyone's on point here, but we'll probably deal with that another day. Actually, I'll see if I can bring it up on Sunday, because we're already late. So verse 3, right? Now it came to pass when the men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all of whom they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. So there's a lot of debate on that one. Like there's a lot of conversation on that one. I'm just going to tell you where I fall, and I think it's because it's the plainest reading of the text. Some people have thought that that's God saying humans can only live 120 years post flood. I don't buy that because of where it falls in the story. I think what's happening is God, because again, it's in the context, right? What's the context? The context is mankind, because we can't forget what happened in the verses before. We have the story of Cain, right? Cain murders Abel, and then we get to Cain's children boasting about murdering people, taking more than one wife, right? They're taking two. I think I always forget their name. The dude's name who was like, "Hey, I killed people." Lamech. And so Lamech's like, "Hey, I killed a kid. I'm super awesome," and he's got two wives. We're seeing this corruption of the line of Cain. Now, what we're seeing is the corruption of the daughters of Adam, or humanity, with the sons of God, meaning the divine. So we've got this corruption, right? And then again, it talks about the corruption. God's like, "I have had it," and then it talks a little bit more about the Nephilim. It tells us about the Nephilim and about that, and then that all of mankind's thoughts were evil. It was violent, and that's where, and then Noah finds grace. So for me, that 120 years, God's spirit, he says this, I can't strive with these people forever. He said that is the buildup to saying he is looking. It's like the humans, they got to go, and the 120 years, that's the time from when he's like, humans got to go, to when I'm going to wipe them all out. The 120 years, I don't think is a specifically, again, God is looking to redeem man. That's why Noah finds favor. But that 120 years for me is about God's like, all right, in 120 years, I'm going to wipe them all out. That's why Noah comes in. That's my thought on that. Cheese-free ginger snap. I think the beast of the earth, I think that is connected. So the beast of the earth is remember, that's a political system. We talked about that in the book of Revelation. But when it talks about the, death, the four horsemen, last one's death, it talks about wild animals. That wild animal in Greek is actually like the word means like a human animal, like a monster. It doesn't necessarily mean like wild animals. It's crazy. And I would like to talk about that more when we get to, because at some point, guys, we're going to talk about Bigfoot and Nephilim. So we will. Just keep that in mind. Could it be that the Holy Spirit was given longevity? I just think humans were designed to live for much longer than we do now. That's what it is. In fact, that's why I kind of look at, we'll talk about that later. But yeah, I think humans were just designed to live longer back then. I don't think the Holy Spirit was giving us anything. It was just we could live that long. But that 120 years, that's definitely God saying, nope, you all got 120 years to straighten up, because I'm pushing the smite button is what's going to happen. No. So lamp of light, again, right now the text doesn't tell us, your question about the Watchers and the Rebel Angels. Here's the thing. The text doesn't tell us this. We haven't gotten there yet. We'll do that when we get to the Book of Enoch next week. But no, I don't think they're the same. I think they are a completely different group of people. I think they are rebellious because of what they do, but I don't think they are of the third per se. Okay, so yeah, now we're getting to stuff from that we're going to cover in the Book of Enoch about as far as Azazel and all that. So yeah, because yeah, Azazel is an interesting character in the Book of Enoch, and I'm kind of the opinion he is a Satan. I don't know if I can definitively say he's the Satan, but I think he's a Satan, and I would not be surprised if that is the figure that Jesus actually confronts in the wilderness. But we'll talk about that when we come to it, because like I said, there's so much here to unpack, it's nuts. And like I said, I know there's a lot of information here. I'm trying to make sure that we're building a foundation off of the text, versus, because unfortunately what a lot of people do, and I'll end on this one. What a lot of people do is they'll find, even if the argument or their conclusion is correct, they don't do the hard work of really proving it out. And that's when you get into problems. Like, a great example, right, is, well, lamp of light, actually, don't let it crush your theory yet, because I think the answer is not as binary as you think. What I'm saying is, yes, the 200 are not. The Book of Enoch gives us some motivation for them. I don't think they're not the rebel angels, but I think we need to rethink the idea of what the rebel angels are, is really my point. So don't scrap it. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Keep that baby. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, because there's a ton. The topic of Azazel alone, I think, will allow us to play with that. But what happened? So the 2017 alignment, we talked about that when we went through the Book of Revelation. I think it was Revelation 12. It's not done until 2027. What a lot of people did was they looked at the conjunction in 2017. They said, well, that looks like Revelation 12, so it must be Revelation 12. The problem is they came to the right they were right about that, but they didn't do the hard work of trying to disprove it. And so they just said, well, since it looks like it, it must be it. And then their imaginations took off from there, right? They didn't actually try to disprove it. They really didn't do the hard work of looking at the text more closely and sticking to the text. We got to make certain that anything we do is built off of the text. So many of the denominations that we see today are not built off of the text. They're built off of people's arguments over people's interpretations of the texts. If we get back to the text, we are safe. Like I said, there are things that I think, and I've said it numerous times, there are ideas that I have, there are things that I think may be true, but I can't prove it out of the text. So I say that may be possible. I won't say that it is the answer, and I will say that may be a reading. But if y'all notice, I'm giving y'all all the different readings of the text, and I will say I don't agree with this conclusion, but you can get that from the text. If we don't anchor ourselves in the text, we unfortunately can go way far afield, and the next thing you know, you're out in the middle of a field somewhere wearing tie-dye, singing Kumbaya, and everyone's sharing everybody else's dungarees, right? I mean, things get weird when you don't stick to the text and you don't make that your anchor. So, like I said, I know there was a lot here. There's a lot that we went through. I know this one was a lot more academic than maybe the next few weeks will be. But I wanted to make certain that we understood that we could make the argument from the text, and from the text alone, that the Nephilim are giants. They are physical giants. They're not metaphorical giants. They're physical giants. They are the offspring of angels and humans. That is known. It's textually correct. The New Testament backs it up. And we kind of had to debunk all the other crap affiliated with it so that we could know what we were talking with and handling. So, next week, we're going to talk about the Book of Enoch and actually expand our knowledge of what the giants were, who was involved in the creation of the giants, and we're going to talk about again this whole Son of God idea. What does that really mean? And we'll tie this into the angels. I would like to maybe deal with that rebel angel question in more detail next week. I don't know if we can get to it, but let me make the suggestion for everybody, right? John, I'll just read this out real quick. John chapter 10, right? This is where they want to stone Jesus, and Jesus, because he was sarcastic at times. He was all like, so which of my good works have that I've, many good works that I've shown you from my Father, which one of those works are you going to stone me? Right? I loved that response because he's like, so the good things I've done for you, they're clearly from God. You're going to stone me for that, right? Which one of those? And they're like, well, we're not saying we're going to stone you because of your good works, but because you claim to be God. And so Jesus here, again, this is chapter 10, verse 34, Jesus answers them and says, is it not written in your law, meaning the Old Testament? And what's interesting is he's about to quote from the Psalms. So he's calling Psalms the law, which is an interesting point. He says, is it not written in your law? And he's quoting from Psalms here. I said you are gods. If he, meaning God, called them gods to whom the word of God came and the scriptures cannot be broken, do you say of him whom the Father sanctified and sent into the world, you are blaspheming because I said I am the Son of God? If I do not do the works of my Father, do not believe me. But if I do, though you do not believe me, believe the works, that you may know and believe that the Father is in me and I am in him. Jesus is is referencing Psalms to prove that he is actually the Son of God. I had originally wanted to talk about this earlier because this is something a lot of people point to where it's like, hey, sons of God can mean political leaders, right? Except if that's what Jesus was saying, the rabbis wouldn't have wanted to kill him because he's saying, hey, I'm just saying I'm a son of God the same way y'all are sons of God. That's how it's traditionally been read. But let's actually read the psalm. It comes from Psalm 82. And what happens? Psalm 82:1, God stands in the congregation of the mighty. He judges among the gods. And show how long will you judge how long will you judge unjustly? So he's talking to the gods, these gods that God is standing at this chamber, right? So he's talking about the judges. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? So he's chastising, the author is asking God to judge these gods. And then God enters the room and says, I said you are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High. So he's talking to divine beings. But you shall die like men and fall like one of the princes. What he's saying there, and this is what we need, and this is why I want to end on this for the concept of the angels, and when we get into the Book of Enoch next week. We have this idea about the rebel angels and all this being a singular event. I don't think that's what's happened. I think we look at it as one big thing because that's how we see it in the text. It's truncated. Again, are the 200 of the rebel angels that we see in the book of Revelation? Probably not. But does it make them rebel angels? Yes, it does. Does it make them one of the third? Possibly. What we have to understand is there's more going on here. It's more complicated, and we'll have to talk about this more next week. But I do recommend looking up into that because we need to get into the idea of Deuteronomy 32, of the council of the gods. We are going to have to explore that in this question of who are the watchers? What was their role? Why were they doing this? How is this happening? Who is Azazel? Who is Satan? All these questions are tied into this narrative that's found in Genesis 6. It's all there. So be here. Same bat time, same bat channel. We're going to keep, like I said, we're going to stay on this thing for a while. So next week, we're going to talk about the Book of Enoch, and we're going to take what we can glean out of that, and really how should we look at the Book of Enoch as well, because that's going to affect what we can take out of it reliably as well. So, guys, hopefully next week I can get this camera working, right? And everything else, and hopefully we can get this fixed, for the weekend. And we got Dr. Bob on Sunday. Dr. Bob's coming. We're gonna have a great conversation on Sunday with Dr. Bob, and then Book of Enoch next week. Y'all be good, and till then, see you later.